What if I told you, you're not tired because life is hard? You're tired because you keep carrying burdens you were never meant to hold. You overthink that conversation. You chase validation from people who don't even respect themselves. You try to fix outcomes, predict moods, control futures that were never yours to command. And it's killing your peace. You are exhausted, not from effort, but from illusion. The illusion that you can control anything outside yourself. They taught you to hold on, to care about what they think, to anticipate, calculate, manage, manipulate, until your mind became a battlefield you couldn't leave. But what they never taught you is this: the tighter you grip, the faster it all slips. And the only way to truly win is to stop trying to control what was never yours to begin with. This is your wake-up call. Let go of the rope, not because you've given up, but because you finally understood control is the cage. Detachment is the key. Not emotional numbness, but emotional intelligence. Not running away, but establishing psychological boundaries so strong that chaos no longer enters without permission. From this point forward, your power won't come from trying harder. It will come from letting go, with precision. From now on, you don't react, you respond. You don't chase, you choose. You don't beg for peace, you embody it, because the fewer things that own your mind, the more dangerous and free you become. I hold nothing. Nothing holds me. Welcome to the shift. The one only 1% ever make. The shift from being controlled to becoming unshakable. Let's begin. You've been taught that control equals strength. Control your schedule. Control your image. Control your outcomes. And above all, control how others see you, respond to you, accept you. Sounds powerful, doesn't it? But here's the truth. The Stoics understood over 2,000 years ago, control is not power. False control is the beginning of quiet self-destruction, because what most people call control is really attachment in disguise. They don't want clarity, they want guarantees. They don't want peace, they want certainty. And they don't want truth, they want everything to go their way. The result, a life lived in constant tension. You walk into a meeting, and someone disagrees with you. It ruins your whole mood. A friend doesn't reply to your message. You spiral for hours. Your plans fall apart. So do you? That's not leadership. That's dependency. And it's a silent epidemic, especially among high performers who think they're in control, when in reality, they've built their confidence on conditions they don't own. There is only one way to happiness. Stop worrying about things beyond your control. Epictetus. This wasn't just philosophy. It was survival. The Stoics didn't preach detachment because they wanted to sound wise. They did it because they knew what happens when a man ties his peace to things that shift with the wind. A single comment, a delay, a rejection, and suddenly you're undone. Why? Because you were never rooted in your own center to begin with. Let's bring this into modern life. If your emotional state depends on how someone treats you today, whether your plan goes perfectly, how many likes your post gets, whether the market cooperates with your ambition, then you're not in control. You're being controlled by randomness, by approval, by outcomes. And here's the real tragedy. Most people never realize they're building their identity on rented land. They become emotional landlords, constantly negotiating peace with things they can't evict. This is where emotional intelligence begins. Not in suppressing emotions, but in learning where they come from. Not in trying to win every situation, but in knowing which ones are worth entering. Emotional mastery begins the moment you stop tying your worth to what's not yours to govern. You don't need to control everything to feel calm. You only need to control one thing: how you choose to interpret what happens. That's where true power begins. And here's the shift. Don't say, "Why is this happening to me?" Start asking, "Is this even mine to control? If it's not, release it." Not out of weakness, but wisdom. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about what truly matters. Your energy, your clarity, your direction. This is mental resilience. The ability to stay composed when the outcome is uncertain, and stay anchored when the world refuses to obey your plans. It's the trait that separates those who panic from those who lead themselves. So next time life doesn't go your way, don't chase control, chase clarity. Ask the Stoic question, what is within my power? If the answer is nothing, then you already know what to do. Let go and move on. You've been taught to invest everything outside of you: your job, your relationships, your goals, your reputation. But here's the paradox. The more you invest outward, the more vulnerable you become inward, because every time you tie your peace to something external, you hand over the keys to your emotional well-being. That's not strength. That's emotional outsourcing. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't aim to control the world. They aimed to master the only thing they truly owned: themselves. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius, they weren't escapists. They were architects, not of walls, but of fortresses built within. And that's your task now, not to manipulate life's chaos, but to create an inner order so solid that chaos can't reach you. Because here's the truth: you can lose a job, you can be betrayed, you can get insulted, rejected, overlooked. But if you've built a strong enough internal operating system, you don't fall, you adapt. This is what high-performance people misunderstand. They think resilience is about pushing harder, but Stoic resilience is about becoming unshakable because you're grounded in something deeper than circumstances. Picture your mind as a fortress, cold, silent, secure. Not because you don't feel, but because you filter. Not because you suppress emotion, but because you govern it. Your thoughts, your attention, your emotional energy, these are your currency. And like any great leader, you don't just give your resources away to anyone who knocks on your gate. Self-leadership begins when you stop reacting to the world and start commanding your inner world. Let me ask you this: when someone disrespects you, do you crumble? When plans fail, do you spiral? When others withdraw, do you beg for validation? If the answer is yes, your fortress has cracks. But don't panic. This isn't about shame. It's about strategy. You don't build inner peace overnight. You build it the way a general fortifies his walls, brick by brick, through discipline in your habits, through precision in your thoughts, through silence when noise demands a reaction, through boundaries when the world wants your attention for free. Emotional intelligence isn't the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of emotional focus. When you master that, you become unreadable, unshakable, undeniable, and that's where real dominance begins. Not in being the loudest voice in the room, but in being the calmest presence. Not in controlling everyone else, but in becoming so composed that no one else can control you. Most people crumble because they've never learned to sit with themselves. But you're going to learn to fortify your solitude, not to escape the world, but to lead yourself through it. So ask yourself, is my inner world strong enough to weather the storms I cannot predict? If not, start building. Because the world doesn't need more reactors. It needs more fortresses. Imagine your mind as a sacred fortress. But now ask yourself, how many back doors have you left open? How many people have unrestricted access to your peace? How many useless thoughts walk in without permission? How much time and attention have you wasted on things that add zero strategic value to your life? This is the truth no one wants to admit. Most people don't control their thoughts. Their thoughts control them. They wake up and immediately check their phones. They let headlines, comments, and algorithms hijack their attention. They absorb the chaos of the world and then wonder why they can't stay calm. That's not intelligence. That's internal anarchy. The Stoics had a word for the opposite of this chaos, eudaimonia, a state of flourishing. But you cannot flourish when your mind is constantly leaking focus. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Epictetus translation. Stop decorating your mind for approval. Start defending it with discipline. Mental discipline is not suppression. It's selection. You don't try to stop thoughts from entering you. Simply decide which ones get to stay. You train your brain like an elite unit. Weak thoughts discarded. Victim beliefs deleted. Emotional noise silenced. Regret about the past cut. Fantasies you can't influence replaced with action. You treat your attention like capital and invest only where the return is clarity, control, or growth. Let's make it practical. Whenever a thought enters your mind, ask, does this serve my mission? Is this in my control? Will this matter in 10 minutes or 10 years? Am I focused on what's real, or am I reacting to someone else's delusion? If the answer is no, you don't entertain. You eliminate, because every time you indulge a worthless thought, you're feeding the very disorder that keeps you anxious, tired, and reactive. And here's what no one tells you. Discipline is the foundation of peace. Without it, even meditation becomes a performance. Even calm becomes temporary. That's why high-performance thinkers don't rely on motivation, they rely on filtration. They set psychological boundaries like military checkpoints. Not everything gets to enter. Not everyone gets to speak. Not every feeling deserves analysis. And not every comment gets a reply. In this world, attention is the new gold. And your job is to become a strategic investor, not an emotional gambler. So the next time your mind starts spinning, pause. Don't believe everything you feel. Don't trust every idea your brain throws at you. You're not your thoughts. You're the commander of them. That's real emotional intelligence. Not being calm for 10 minutes a day, but being in command of your inner world. Hour by hour. especially when the world is loud. Most people are walking around with open gates, wondering why they're drained. But you're building something else. A mind that doesn't just survive chaos, it outperforms it. And that begins with the discipline to say, this thought doesn't serve me. It ends here. Because every thought you master builds the mental fortress that no storm can shake. The moment you react emotionally, you lose strategic control. Think about it. The world is full of triggers, disrespect, manipulation, chaos, betrayal. And every time you flinch, argue, explain, justify, you are broadcasting your weakness. You're showing people the exact buttons to push and giving them the remote. The Stoics weren't passive. They were powerful because they chose when and how to respond. They didn't react to insults. They observed them. They didn't panic in chaos. They breathed through it, because they understood something most people never learn. Reaction is submission. Observation is dominance. When someone disrespects you and you snap back, you lose. When someone provokes you and you retaliate, you confirm their power. But when you respond with calm, measured silence, you become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. And that terrifies people far more than any loud response ever could. In high-performance environments, leadership, negotiations, combat, elite sport, the person who stays calm the longest controls the room. That's not passivity. That's psychological warfare. So how do you train non-reaction? Here's the truth. You don't react by default. You pause by design. Between every stimulus and response is a moment, a pause, a decision point. That pause is where your power is forged. In that split second, you choose to act with intention or emotion, to lead the interaction or fall into it, to operate from inner control or outer chaos. Most people never use that pause. They're emotional landmines, waiting to explode. You turn that pause into a weapon. Let me be clear. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't perform for people who haven't earned your energy. You let them wonder, let them guess, let them spin their narrative. Because while they're unraveling, you're calculating. That's psychological asymmetry, and it's lethal. This is why emotional regulation is a form of executive strength. It's not soft. It's elite mental control. You don't flinch. You don't panic. You don't need to be right in the moment. You're not fighting for ego. You're playing for dominion. So next time someone disrespects you, don't react. Just pause. Just stare. Just let the silence speak. Let their fire burn out trying to provoke your ice. Because the one who remains calm when the room heats up, that's the one everyone starts watching and fearing. If someone provokes you, remember, it is your choice whether or not to be disturbed. Marcus Aurelius, and that choice, again and again, is what separates the Stoic warrior from the emotional puppet. There's a kind of strength the world misunderstands. The strength to walk away, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of absolute clarity. Most people think detachment is coldness. It's not. Detachment is precision. Detachment is refusing to bleed for what doesn't serve your mind or your mission. You don't walk away because you don't care. You walk away because you care too much about your energy, your time, and your peace. That's not emotional weakness. That's mental sovereignty. He who is brave is free. Seneca. And nothing requires more bravery than letting go, cleanly, without rage, without explanation. Strategic detachment means this: you don't chase closure. You create it. You don't explain your standards. You enforce them. You don't get consumed by what crumbles. You step over the rubble and move forward. Let's get real. Most people carry emotional deadweight friendships that drain, relationships that manipulate, goals that were never truly theirs, expectations they inherited, not chose. They keep trying to fix what was broken by design. But here's the truth: you can't rescue what's determined to self-destruct. You can't control outcomes built on instability. You're not obligated to keep bleeding for a story that no longer fits your future. Detachment, at its highest form, is an act of strategic self-respect. You set your own exit point. You choose where your focus goes and where it doesn't. And when a person, situation, or thought no longer aligns with your standards, you cut it off, not with cruelty, but with calculated finality. Not everyone deserves closure. Not every moment deserves a reaction. And not every loss is a tragedy. Some are liberation in disguise. Here's the rule of high-performance self-discipline: never attach to anything you cannot walk away from in 5 seconds when it compromises your clarity, code, or peace of mind. That's not detachment from people. That's detachment from dependency. It means being involved, but never entangled. It means caring, but never collapsing. It means feeling everything, but being owned by nothing. This mindset makes you faster than those still stuck debating, cleaner than those drowning in drama, sharper than those addicted to closure. Detachment is what allows you to move like a ghost, silent, efficient, unstoppable. Comment this: now I walk light. I cut sharp. I owe nothing to what drains me. This is emotional minimalism. This is tactical indifference. This is your power. Most people think power is about presence, being seen, being loud, being everywhere. But true power is about being missed. The moment you learn to disappear on purpose is the moment you stop playing their game and start redesigning the board. Absence is a psychological weapon, and most people are unarmed against it. In a world addicted to attention, the one who withdraws theirs becomes untouchable. Here's why people expect energy. They crave your reaction. They feed off your presence. So when you remove it, you create a vacuum, a silence, a question mark. Why did they go silent? What are they planning? Did I lose access to them forever? That's not confusion. That's control. The Stoics knew the art of stepping back, not in weakness, but in strategic stillness. Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful than your own soul." But peace isn't passive. It's positioning. Here's what happens when you practice strategic absence. You break their rhythm. You force reflection. You introduce a uncertainty. You regain leverage. You're no longer reacting to the world. You're redirecting the world by disappearing from it just enough to disturb the balance. Let's get tactical. When someone disrespects you, you don't fight, you fall silent. When a situation gets toxic, you don't over-explain. You vanish. When energy becomes chaotic, you don't beg for peace. You exit and become peace itself. That silence, it becomes a mirror. They see themselves in it. And often, they can't stand the reflection. Remember this law of executive mindset. The more available you are, the more expendable you become. Your scarcity builds demand. Your silence builds mystery. Your absence builds power, not because they fear you'll return with force, but because they realize they lost access to something they never fully understood. Emotional intelligence at this level is not about controlling others. It's about being so in command of yourself that others can't afford to lose your presence, and yet you make them live without it. That's high-performance detachment. That's luxury-level leadership. Comment this now. My absence is a mirror. My silence is control. You've learned how to detach. Now you've learned how to disappear with leverage. If they can read you, they can reach you. And if they can reach you, they can control you. That's why the Stoic doesn't just remain calm, he becomes unreadable. In a world where everyone overshares, where people post every thought, every feeling, every moment, the person who reveals nothing becomes terrifying. People don't fear your strength. They fear what they can't predict. So, the question is, do you leave trails or do you vanish into mystery? Most people advertise their insecurity with nervous laughs, with over-explaining, with desperate texts, passive-aggressive reactions, or trying too hard confidence. They narrate their emotions, they broadcast their weakness, they make themselves easy to map. But you're going dark. Not because you're empty inside, but because your depth has no surface. Psychological power begins where predictability ends. Think like a strategist. The more information you reveal, the easier you are to defeat. The more emotions you leak, the more leverage they gain. The more you defend yourself, the more they know where to strike. That's why stillness is not just silence, it's structure. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But if you expose every thought, you let the world repaint your mind." The Stoic protects his thoughts like a general guards the fortress. Every word is chosen, every gesture intentional, every silence designed. Here's how to become unreadable in real life. Say less than you know. Speak only when speaking serves the outcome. Train your face. Your expression should be neutral, not numb calm, not cold. Keep them guessing. Let them misunderstand you. Let them assume. You don't correct. You collect, because the more you're misunderstood, the more you hold the advantage of ambiguity. You don't owe anyone your inner world. You don't need to explain your standards. You don't need to justify your silence. You don't need to argue for your worth. Let your discipline speak for you. Let your absence raise questions. Let your stillness become legend. Because when you're unreadable, you're unshakable. This is mental warfare at the highest level, not because you manipulate others, but because you refuse to be manipulated. You don't react. You respond when it's strategic. You don't reveal. You observe in total command. Comment this now. They can't play what they can't read. My silence is my sword. We're not done yet, because in the final chapter, we reach the highest state a Stoic mind can achieve. The untouchable state, not emotionless, not cold, but forged by fire and no longer flinching. Let's go. There's a state beyond silence, beyond detachment, beyond discipline. It's the untouchable state, where your peace is not a reaction, it's your default, where you no longer need the world to behave a certain way, because you've mastered the only domain that ever mattered, yourself. This state doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it and refusing to flinch. You've been lied to. You were taught that strength means being in control of everything. But the real elite, the spiritually disciplined, the mentally ruthless know a higher truth. You don't control the world. You control your need to control. To reach the untouchable state, you must kill certain things inside yourself. Your hunger for validation, your addiction to being understood, your compulsion to defend your character, your emotional dependence on being seen, chosen, or liked. That's not just emotional intelligence, that's spiritual discipline. You become the version of yourself that no longer negotiates with weakness. You sit inside yourself like a general in command, calm, focused, unavailable to chaos. Let me be clear, the untouchable state is not being cold. It's not about shutting down. It's about being impenetrable without being numb. It's about feeling everything, but leaking nothing. You still love. You still care. But you don't collapse when things don't go your way. You don't beg for closure. You become the closure. You don't chase peace. You are the peace. This level of self-mastery turns you into a paradox. You're warm, but unreadable, present, but uninvested, fully aware, but not owned by anything. That's why this state is so rare. It demands that you sacrifice comfort for clarity and exchange chaos for command. And here's the irony. When you stop needing to be understood, you become respected. When you stop explaining, you start moving in silence. And when you no longer flinch, they can't figure out what will ever break you. Because nothing can. Apply this in your life. 1. Someone insults you, you don't even register it. Their words don't touch the identity you've forged in solitude. 2. Someone ghosts you, you don't spiral. You recenter. 3. You lose something or someone. You adjust your perimeter, not your worth. You no longer fall apart. You refine. You redirect. You rise again sharper. The untouchable state is also your highest performing self. Why? Because when your mind is no longer hijacked by emotion, you move with surgical precision. You're not rushing to prove anything. You're not reacting to bait. You're not chasing what was never meant for you. Every move becomes clean, calculated, and high impact. That's what leaders, visionaries, warriors all have in common. They don't just move. They move from a place of inner command. This is no longer just Stoicism. It's your mental operating system now. You don't adapt your peace to the world. You make the world adjust to your peace. You become the man or woman who walks into chaos and doesn't blink, Who's whispered about in rooms you've left? Who no longer plays the game? Because you've learned to write the rules. Comment this now. My peace is not a negotiation. My mind is my kingdom. You've made it here because you were ready. You didn't skip. You didn't break. You stayed in the fire until only steel remained. And from this point forward, you don't just practice Stoicism, you embody it, not in noise, not in show, but in silence that shakes the room. You are now untouchable, and that is your true freedom. In a world where emotional overload is normalized, emotional minimalism is a radical act. Most people live with their feelings on the outside, exposed, vulnerable, easily manipulated. They react to every comment, every silence, every change in someone else's mood, as if it were a threat to their existence. But a Stoic mind learns to strip it all down, to move light, to cut clean, to stop bleeding for what no longer belongs in your life. Letting go doesn't mean you never cared. It means you refuse to carry what was never yours to hold. Let's get this straight. You weren't meant to carry everyone's expectations, emotions, or chaos. You weren't meant to fix what's broken by design, or justify your peace to people committed to misunderstanding you. You were meant to master you. That's it. Everything else, their noise, their opinions, their drama, that's external. It's background static. And if you don't mute that static, it will drown out your mission. So what is emotional minimalism? It's not apathy. It's not coldness. It's clarity. It's the discipline of saying, my energy is not cheap, my peace is not negotiable, and my boundaries are not soft. Imagine your emotional energy as currency. Most people spend it like loose change, pouring it into arguments that go nowhere. People who take more than they give, and outcomes they can't control. But high-performance minds, they invest that energy like capital. They fund what grows them. They cut what drains them. This is how Stoicism becomes a mindset for emotional intelligence, because when you stop needing to be understood, you gain the freedom to move silently. You gain the strength to walk away without explaining. You realize that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you protect. And anything that costs your peace is too expensive. The moment you stop leaking energy into battles that aren't yours, you start building a mind that cannot be broken. So here's a practice when the urge comes to respond. Pause. When your heart wants to hold on. Pause. When your mind starts spinning scenarios that haven't even happened yet, pause. Ask yourself, does this deserve my energy, my voice, my presence? If the answer is no, let it go. Clean cut. No bleeding. No begging. No story to justify it. Emotional minimalism isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming harder to disturb. Not out of fear, out of self-respect. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to prove your worth through endless patience with the wrong people. You don't need to fight battles that don't reward your growth. You only need to be precise with your attention, your effort, your emotion. So start now. Stop writing paragraphs to people who ignore your sentences. Stop watering connections that dry you out. Stop being emotionally available to those who weaponize your care. This is the sharp edge of emotional intelligence, It's not soft. It's not sweet. It's strategic. Say less. Care wisely. Let go early. Because bleeding for what you can't control is not noble. It's self-abandonment. And you're not here to abandon yourself. You're here to master yourself. Comment this. I protect my peace like a fortress. I cut clean. I carry nothing that cuts me. There comes a point on the Stoic path where you no longer flinch at the storm, not because it's quieter, but because you have become louder inside. You don't react. You don't explain. You don't prove. You hold. That's what mastery looks like. Stillness in motion, presence under pressure, discipline under fire. The truth is, the world won't get easier. The people around you won't suddenly become wiser, kinder, or more consistent. But that was never the requirement. What was required and still is that you change, that you become untouchable, not by force, but by design. You don't escape the world. You rise above its noise. You don't fight for power. You become the source of it. This final state isn't about control, it's about command. Not over others, but over your own inner world. Here's the paradox. The less you try to control everything, the more powerful you become. Because true influence isn't loud. It doesn't broadcast. It simply exists and shifts the space it enters. So what does that look like in practice? It looks like a man who doesn't chase status because he's grounded in purpose. It looks like a woman who doesn't over-explain because she moves in precision. It looks like a leader who doesn't need to shout because presence alone speaks. Your final form isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent in your values, in your discipline, in your code. The person who lives by a code becomes immune to chaos, because chaos thrives on reaction, and your silence is the lock it can't break. You now live by the highest standard self-governance. You no longer rent your identity to trends, triggers, or the shifting winds of public opinion. You no longer give your peace away like a free sample. You protect it like territory because it is. You're not cold. You're calibrated. You're not distant. You're deliberate. You're not heartless. You're disciplined. This is the new standard. This is your code. This is the place where chaos meets its match and loses. Comment this. I don't follow peace. I become it. From this moment on, move like a mind that cannot be shaken. Because you've trained for this. Because you've earned this. Because you are now what they cannot touch. Let this be the final truth you engrave into your mind. You were never meant to control everything. You were meant to control yourself, absolutely. Let them chase applause. Let them drown in noise. Let them burn out trying to fix what was never theirs to fix. You choose clarity over chaos. You move with precision. You cut what doesn't serve. You lead in silence not because you fear conflict, but because you've mastered the only war that matters, the one within. You don't react. You respond. You don't cling. You release. You don't explain. You execute. And now, you walk forward, unreadable, unshakable, untouchable. Because when you detach from everything outside your control, you become unstoppable from within. If this message hit you deep, not just in your ears, but in your code, then don't just like this video. Live it. Own it. Become it. Subscribe for more high-performance Stoic training. Share this video with someone who needs to stop bleeding energy into things they can't command. And drop a comment right now. I control myself. I release the rest. We don't escape the storm. We become the calm inside it.